Namaste, Uday, Jai Jinendra, Pranam, Kemcho, and hello. My name is Ajay, and I look after the Northwest Health and Wellbeing portfolio alongside Bunsi, who's in the front, and Prafula Ben as well. So first of all, thank you all for coming today. Welcome to a talk on living with dementia. So this is one of, this now is a big issue in our community. As we are getting older, growing older, this is, I'm afraid, one of the side effects. Today, we first welcome Varsha Dodia, who will speak about Alzheimer's and vascular dementia. Pre-COVID, she ran a very successful dementia clinic from home. Debbie Howe is our project manager on my right here. So she works in dementia hubs of Ashford Place. She's got 15 years of experience and has been running advice services in the community. She works alongside her colleague Sheila. She's also in Ashford Place. So you'll have an opportunity for some Q&A at the end. So if you do have anything, please hold fire and you will get an opportunity. So can I first ask a friend of mine, Raj Danani, to just say a few words? His father has dementia, and it'll be nice, I think, to hear what the situation could get to. So he's just getting undressed.
Jai Janendra, Namaste Badane. Okay, my name is Rajesh Danani. My father is Dominic Lal Premchand Danani. We originate from Kiambu, from Islay, and we live in London now, nearly coming to 50 years. My dad's worked very hard all his life from a young age, like most of the Asians who came in 70, 72, 73 in this country. He worked in Selfridges for 27 years, healthy, every day, go to work, never a day when he was off sick, worked really hard. Retired at the age of 65. He had a wonderful life at the age of 65. Took my mom to Jatra. They traveled the world, both of them. You know, my dad could, read and write, but, they managed to do all the transfer from Alaska airport to Austin to wherever. And all of a sudden, at the age of about 80, things started slowing down. So my dad, how it all happened was, he used to sometimes give me a lift to work because I was a lazy guy. So he used to come and drop me sometimes. So one day he dropped me, and then my mom called me at work and says, Bapuji, that's how we call my dad, has not arrived home. So this is almost now about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So he's worried about, I called my cousins. We rang all the hospitals and police stations and everywhere. Because the story short, eventually we found him and he came back. So we realized there was something going wrong. And he was still driving for a few more weeks, 4 months. And then he used to, and then I don't know if people know my dad. My dad would be at Oswald Center 3 times a week. He would be out there taking all the people from Wembley, Harrow, Kenton, taking Badai, Nana, Motane, Badai, Lane. He would take them to all the functions. He started missing his turnings. He didn't know how to get to Oswald Center from Wembley. He started losing his directions. All right, so the hardest thing was for us to take the keys off him. So it's about 81, when he was about 81, 82, we took the keys off him. I said, Bapuji, you've done really hard work. You've done everything. You've driven a lot of people around. It's our time now to drive you. So we took the keys. Wasn't very happy, but we managed to do it. And slowly from there, we realized that one day, because my dad did not sit at home. He's always out shopping. He's always doing things. He's always doing his bus rides and everything, because he's always worked all his life. He's not the person who will sit and turn on the telly and watch. One Sunday, we were all sitting there. All of a sudden, under our eyes, He opened the door and he walked out. And yeah, from Wembley, that was North Wembley. And for hours and hours, we're looking for him. We had called the police, the helicopters. We went to all the buses that were near the house, trying to, see if we could find him, put out the photographs out. Luckily, the police. So this is a very important thing, guys. The police said, put it on the Facebook, put it on social media. My son put my dad's or his grandfather's photograph on the social media. Luckily, there was one person coming from, one of our Shishukun member was coming from St. Albans. This was about it was the 4th of December. It was a cold evening. He only wore slippers, a sleeveless jumper, and it was getting dark. So it was about nearly 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 o'clock, it was getting dark. He saw him, this family was, the Shah family was coming from St. Albans, and they saw there's somebody walking along A1 near M1, the A1. And I said, they stopped the car. It was my dad. That was how lucky we were to find him, because we thought we lost him. I mean, from where he was to where he went, obviously then all the investigation started and we started finding his situation. Now, once we knew exactly what was wrong with him, he had vascular dementia, that's what he was, the prognosis showed that's what he had. But then obviously the difficult part was he was also incontinent, double incontinence, very difficult for mom, for us to care for him. We all live together in a house. The difficult being that he would not know what he wants, when to eat, when to go to the toilet, when to do what. But that also stopped just during the COVID, at the start of COVID 2020. He had a stroke, he had a brain damage. What happened with that? He lost his mobility. So he's now totally bedbound, in a wheelchair, or he's totally bedbound. The impact on the whole family and all that, because we all live together, my children, my family, my sisters, and everybody here, my cousins, and everybody's how they're helping. But the pandemic time was a very difficult time. Nobody could come home. So my dad's really forgotten a lot of people. He can't recognize, he doesn't talk, he doesn't recognize me, he doesn't recognize anybody. So, when I look at him, I'm sitting down here watching a television, dad sitting in a wheelchair, and I look at him and he's out in his own mind, in his own world. It's a very meditative state. I believe he's fully at peace. But unfortunately, he cannot make communications. So he can't explain what he wants you to do. Will I stop there? This is what the situation is at the moment. Yeah. So, yeah, it was a perfectly like us, and then one day something happened. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajesh Bhai, for sharing your father's story. We've known your family. We played as children in Kenya when you used to come to Narabdaben's house. So, and yes, somebody who worked so hard. It's really difficult to really, and I empathize with you because you've become a family carer, and your situation would be similar to so many households in UK and even in Kenya and also in India at the moment, because we live in extended families. And I really relate to what you are saying. So today, the presentation I'm going to give, some of it is lived experience, because I was a carer too. And my journey has been, from being a carer to, because one thing is, it takes us so long to really come to terms that the person has dementia, to be able to talk about it, to acknowledge it. It's just you're taking away that person's dignity. I really relate to what you were saying, that your father is your father first and foremost. You've spent your whole life with the person, and suddenly that person is not the person you knew. So this illness, and I want to really emphasize, it's an illness. It can hit anybody. Okay. And today's talk is about just illuminating. હું થોડું ગુજરાતીમાં બોલીશ કારણ કે આપણા ઘણા બધા મોટી ઉંમરના છે અહીંયા કે આપણી ભાષામાં આપણે સમજી શકીએ. Okay. Next. So શરૂઆત આપણે કહીએ ડિમેન્શિયા ને આલ્ઝાઇમર્સ વચ્ચે શું ફરક? બધાને સવાલ થાય. મારો એ જ કહેવાનું, આપણે ઘણી વાર વિચાર કરીએ કે કેન્સર કોઈને હોય તો તમે પૂછો લંગ કેન્સર છે, સ્કિન કેન્સર છે, લોહીમાં કેન્સર છે. તો ડિમેન્શિયા કેન્સર જેવો અમ્બ્રેલા વર્ડ છે. એની નીચે જુદી જુદી જાતના ડિમેન્શિયા હોય. Okay? અને ઘણી બધી જુદી જાતના છે. નેક્સ્ટ સ્લાઇડ પ્લીઝ. સો અત્યારે લગભગ 8.5 થી 9 લાખ વ્યક્તિઓ આપણા યુકેમાં છે જેમને ડિમેન્શિયા છે. આ સ્ટેટિસ્ટિક્સ અહીંયાના છે. અને વધારે પડતા આ જેમની ઉંમર મોટી થાય ને, એમ જેમ રાજેશભાઈએ કહ્યું કે 80 વર્ષ સુધી એમના ફાધર really good life, but after 80 it started. ઘણી વાર હોય કે એનાથી વહેલું શરૂઆત થઈ ગઈ હોય પણ આપણને ખબર ના પડી હોય. Okay? સો મેઇનલી કે મોટી ઉંમરના હોય ને એ લોકોને આ દર્દ હોય છે અને પુરુષો અને સ્ત્રીઓ બધાને અફેક્ટ કરે. અહીંયા ઘણા બધા હશે જેમના મમ or the mother in the family has dementia. Okay? અને sometimes when we see આપણા ટીવી ઉપર કે તો ડિમેન્શિયા જોઈએ ને તો ઓલી મોટી ડોસીઓ હોય ને કેર હોમમાં એ લોકોનું દેખાડે કારણ કે આપણે લેડીઝ છે ને આપણું આયુષ્ય થોડું વધારે લાંબુ હોય. સો ઘણા વર્ષ ડિમેન્શિયા સાથે જીવવાનું થાય. Okay? So these are the factors. અને એવું નથી કે જસ્ટ મોટી ઉંમરના હોય. અત્યારે લગભગ 16 થી વધારે વ્યક્તિઓ 65 વર્ષની ઉંમર હોય ને એની નીચેના હોય જેમને ડિમેન્શિયા થઈ જાય છે. Recently we've lost a close family friend who was 63 years old. So, and it's called young onset dementia. So if you get diagnosed with dementia, if you're not 65, because 65 was the retirement age, so they call it young onset dementia. Now, આ slide ઉપર I'm going to mention one thing, right? ઘણા બધા risk factors છે. પણ આપણે બધા એલ્યુમિનિયમ or ગુજરાતીમાં કહેલા ટીનના તપેલામાં એમાં આપણે પાણી ગરમ કરીએ ને તો કસ થઈ જાય, જરા કાળું થઈ જાય. So that is aluminum oxide. અને આપણી રેણી કેણી એવી રીતે હોય. So one thing I would advise everybody is કે એ એલ્યુમિનિયમનું હોય ને એમાં પાણી નહીં ગરમ કરવાનું, because that aluminum oxide has some effect on your brain. Okay? We now આપણી પાસે stainless steel નું હોય ને, that's better. Okay? Just આપણી રેણી કેણી રીતે. So specifically કે પાણી એમાં નહીં ગરમ કરવાનું. Okay? Next one. So આ બધી જુદી જુદી જાતના dementia છે. If you see the yellow part, Alzheimer's, that is the most prevalent of dementia. And that's why we have Alzheimer's Society. But there are also the other one. The green one is vascular dementia. And આપણે South Asian છે ને, આપણા ઘણા બધાને આ vascular dementia થાય કારણ કે આપણને cardiovascular problem ઘણો બધો છે. તમે માનતા હશો તમારા ફેમિલીમાં કોઈને હશે કે હાર્ટનો પ્રોબ્લેમ છે, કોઈને સ્ટેન્ટ નાખી દીધી છે, કોઈનું બાયપાસ ઓપરેશન કરવું પડ્યું છે. So as South Asian, we have high incidence of cardiovascular problems. So this kind of dementia affects us more. And the blue part is a mixed. Okay. Now I'm just going to 3 or 4 છે Lewy bodies. Lewy bodies ઓછું હોય પણ એમાં છે ને કે નાની નાની ગાંઠો થઈ જાય આપણા બ્રેઇનમાં. And that has effects. And Lewy bodies ma, the person's personality changes very quickly. The other one is frontotemporal, which is the thinking brain. આપણા હું બતાવીશ તમને. And that one. અને ઘણા બધાને Parkinson's. So Parkinson's is actually a neurological condition. કારણ કે એ આપણા nerves હોય ને આપણે ધ્રુજારી થાય. But there is also some effect on the brain. So sometimes you get a joint. And the other one which we knew, if you remember, mad cow disease, right? આપણે કેટલી બધી કેટલને કતલ કર્યા હતા 1990s છેલ્લે, because they had a tissue in their brain that got with proteins damaged. So they couldn't, એ લોકો એકદમ ડોલતી હતી ને પછી પડી જાય. So if it had come into human form, it would have been called CJD. Okay? Next slide, please. So this is what I've covered: Alzheimer's, vascular dementia, Lewy body, frontotemporal, and CJD. These are the key ones. બીજા બધા ઘણી બધી જુદી જુદી જાતના હોય, but these are the key ones. Next slide. So આ દર્દ થાય ક્યાં આગળ? So આ જે પિક્ચર છે એ આપણા બ્રેઇનનું પિક્ચર છે. એના 3 ભાગ હોય. એક ઓલું કડચલી વાળું દેખાય છે ને આગળનું, that's આપણું thinking brain. એની વચ્ચે is આપણું emotional brain. આપણે lizard brain કહીએ ઘણીવાર, where our emotions are. અને ત્રીજો ભાગ છે એ આપણા સ્પાઇનની નીચે આપણે દાંડી કહીએ બ્રેઇનની, the spinal cord. So all these 3 are connected. This is the brain system. And that's why, you know, when you think about it, કે nervous signals ને બધું જાતું હોય, આ દાંડીનો brain અને એમાં એનું texture. અને the brain નું વજન હોય about 1 કિલો ખાંડની કોથળી હોય ને એવું. અને એનું ટેક્સચર છે આપણે જેલી બનાવીએ ને એના જેવું. નેક્સ્ટ સ્લાઇડ. સો આજે બીજું કાંઈ પણ તમે યાદ ના રાખી શકો ને તો આ પિક્ચરને યાદ રાખજો, બીકોઝ આ પિક્ચર ઇઝ રિયલી રિયલી ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ. આપણે શરીરને કસરત ને બધું કરીએ કે શું લોહી સરખું હરી ફરે. આપણે કોઈ દિવસ વિચાર કર્યો છે કે આપણી બ્રેઇનમાં પણ એ જ સેમ લોહી હરે ફરે છે? અને આ બધી આર્ટરીઝ ને વેઇન્સ પાતળી પાતળી. So every part of your brain needs the oxygen. 20% of the oxygen we use is actually consumed by the brain. Okay, so Sukai, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? So one thing is really important કે જે કંઈ આપણે જ્યારે એક્સરસાઇઝ કે કરતા હોય ત્યારે think about કે how am I getting the oxygen to my brain. અને જેમ ઉંમર થાય એમ આ છે ને આપણી પાતળી પાતળી એ જ્યાં નાડીઓ એ સુકાતી જાય. આપણા મોટા હશે કોઈ કહેશે હવે સુશલાબેન ચણિયા લાંબા થાય છે કારણ કે હાઈટ થોડી નીચી થવા માંડી છે. કોઈ હશે બાપુજી 32 પહેરતા હશે તો કે હવે આ ઢીલી થઈ ગઈ છે. હવે 32 તો ઓલું પ્લાસ્ટિકનું હોય એમાં ફેર નથી પડ્યું, પણ આ તમારો જડબો છે ને એ સુકાવા માંડ્યો છે. આપણી આ ચામડીઓ કડચલી કેટલી બધી પડી છે, રાઈટ? ધીઝ આર ઓલ સાઇન્સ ઓફ એજિંગ. અને આપણે કોઈને અટકાવી નહીં શકીએ, આપણે કોઈ એને નથી અટકાવી શકવાના, પણ બ્રેઇન એવું ને એવું પરફેક્ટ રહી કે એમાં પણ ફેરફાર થશે. So as age progresses, this is something really really important. અને પછી હું કહીશ કે આપણામાં જો પ્રાણાયામ કરાવે ને યોગામાં, that actually makes sure કે the brainમાં તમારું ઓક્સિજન જાય. It really stimulates the brain. So this is something really important for everybody. By the time you are 40, you need to start working on it. Because પછી 80 વર્ષે પછી પાછું ફેરવવું બહુ અઘરું પડશે. Okay, next slide. So just કે આ સ્ટ્રક્ચર ને કોઈ વાર તમને ડાયગ્નોસિસ કે આપે ને કે you know what part of the brain. So what happens is કે sometimes you get a little કઈ એને ઇન્ફ્રાક્ટ કઈ કે કઈ તો એમ લાગે કે નજરમાં ફેર પડી ગયો છે, ઓચિંતાનો કે સાંભળવામાં ફેર પડી ગયો છે. Because what has happened is that some part of your brain has been affected. Okay, balance. જેમ ઉંમર થાય આપણું બેલેન્સ ડિફરન્ટ થવા માંડે. અને ઘણીવાર કાનમાં ફેર હોય તો બેલેન્સમાં ફેર પડી જાય. પણ બેલેન્સ ઇઝ રિયલી ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ કારણ કે વન થિંગ એઝ વી એજ કે ફોલ્સ પડી જવાની બીકરે, એટલે એના માટે સો ધેટ્સ વેર ધ બેલેન્સનું છે. અને વચમાં ઇઝ ધેટ થિંકિંગ બ્રેઇન કે આપણું ઇમોશનલ બ્રેઇન કહીએ. ઓકે, આ બહારનું છે કડછલી વાળું, દેટ્સ અ થિંકિંગ બ્રેઇન. વચમાં છે, that's where the emotional brain is. Okay, next one. So this is about Alzheimer's now. જેમ મેં વાત કરી કે આપણે જેમ ઉંમર વધે એમ આપણું જે બ્રેઇનમાં ચેન્જીસ આવવા માંડે. સો નીચેનો ભાગ છે ને, half of it is the healthy brain, but if you see the other half, which is advanced Alzheimer's, ઘણો બધો ફેર પડી ગયો છે. એક તો નાનું થઈ ગયું છે, એમાં લિટરલી હોલ્સ થવા માંડ્યા છે, અને આ ઝાંખું થઈ જાય એટલે શું કે આપણી મગજ શક્તિ, આપણે જે કામ કરવાનું છે, જેમ રાજેશભાઈએ કહ્યું કે એક દિવસ બાપુજી નીકળી ગયા, એમને ખ્યાલ નતો કે એ ક્યાં ગયા છે. રાઈટ, સો ધીસ ઇઝ ધ ડિફિકલ્ટી કે વન્સ યુ સ્ટાર્ટ કે તમારું ઓરિએન્ટેશન ના રહે. The word which is used is cognition. ને કોગ્નિશનમાં ઘણો બધો ફેર થઈ જાય. So one of the things about Alzheimer's is કે literally તમારું બ્રેઇન shrink થઈ ગયું છે, એમાં ઘણો બધો ફેરફાર થઈ ગયો છે. Next one. અને સેલ્સ આપણા બધા જે હોય ને બ્રેઇનના, એમાં they call it tangles ને plaque. ઘણીવાર ગુજરાતીમાં શું કહીએ આપણે, મગજનું દહીં થઈ ગયું છે. એનો ઓલો ખીજાણા હોય ને કોઈ તો એમ કહે મગજનું દહીં થઈ ગયું છે. આ ઝાંખું પડી જાય, પ્લાક થઈ ગયું હોય અંદર. જેમ ઓલું મેડ કાઉ ડિઝીઝનું મેં તમને દ્રશ્ય આપ્યું, એવી રીતે ધ પર્સન્સ બ્રેઇન સેલ્સ હેવ સ્ટાર્ટેડ. અને એમાં જે ઓલી બધી કનેક્શન્સ હોય ને, જેમ આપણા વાળ ગૂંચવાઈ જાય ને એવી રીતે ટેંગલ થવા માંડે. ઓકે, સો ફિઝિકલી એ બ્રેઇનમાં ઘણો બધો ફેર પડી ગયો છે. નેક્સ્ટ સ્લાઇડ. હવે વન થિંગ દેટ વી નોટિસ ઇઝ આપણી મેમરીઝ. સો ધીસ ઇઝ અલ્ઝાઇમર સોસાયટીનું કે આપણી યાદશક્તિ હોય, તમને કોઈ મોટાને પૂછશો કે ઓલું નાઇરોબીનું, તો એટલું ફાઇન યાદ હશે, કારણ કે એ મેમરી એકદમ ઘૂંટાઈ ગઈ છે એકદમ. પણ કલાક પહેલા ચા પીધી હતી, સાથે નાસ્તો ખાધો તો કોઈ વાર ભૂલાઈ ગયું હોય. સો ઓલું શોર્ટ ટર્મ મેમરી હોય ને એ ભૂલાઈ જાય, ઓલી લોંગ ટર્મ મેમરી રહી. સો ધીસ ઇઝ ધ થિંગ કે હવે આ બુક શેલ્ફમાં બધી બુક્સ રાખેલી હોય, તમે આ બુક શેલ્ફને શેક કરો તો કઈ પહેલા પડવા માંડશે? જે ઉપરની છે ને એ. સો ધોઝ આર ધ રિસન્ટ મેમરીઝ. ઓલી નીચેની બુક્સ છે ને એ ચાઇલ્ડહુડની ઈ મેમરીઝ છે. એટલે આ ડિઝીઝ જ્યારે થાય ને ત્યારે what we need to do is connect the person to their childhood memories, because that is the things that stay with them. તમે અત્યારનું હોય એમને યાદ નહીં રહી. Okay, so that's how the memory functions. Next slide. So શરૂઆત પહેલા ગમે ત્યાંથી થાય, પછી એ ફેલાવા માંડે. So this is about Alzheimer's. વ્યક્તિનું પર્સનાલિટી ચેન્જ થઈ જાય. કોઈ હોય તો સાવ શાંત પડી જાય, જેમને બહુ બોલવા જોઈએ તો તું હળીમળીને રહેતા હતા, સાવ શાંત થઈ જાય. ઓર કોઈ એટલા અકળાઈ જાય કે એકદમ ગુસ્સો વાળો સ્વભાવ થઈ જાય. So these changes in personality is one of the first indicators, because આપણને આપણું અસ્તિત્વ, આપણે કોણ છીએ એમ લાગે હવે મને કાંઈ યાદ નથી રહેતું, મને જવું છે વેમલી, પણ હવે આ બસ સમજ નથી પડતી, આપણે જ અકળાઈ જાય આપણી સાથે. So that is part of, feeling okay, you can't cope anymore. You feel really angry with yourself. And part of accepting this disease is that anger that builds within the person. Okay? Three things કે ઓલું communicate કરવાનું. વાત કરતા હોય ને, ઓર એકને એક વાર 3 કે 4 વાર બોલ્યા રાખે. તમે એને જવાબ આપ્યો હોય, વળી પાછા ભૂલી ગયા, એ સેમ ક્વેશ્ચન પાછો આવી જાય. રાઈટ, because they haven't registered, એ લોકોના કનેક્શન્સ નથી થયા. And that is one of the symptoms જ્યારે આપણે શરૂઆત કરીએ કે ભૂલતા જાય, ઓ હમણાં કર્યું તું, થોડીક વાર પછી ચાવી ક્યાંક મૂકી દીધી છે, રાઈટ, મારી વસ્તુ ક્યાંક મૂકી દીધી છે. ઘણીવાર આપણું હોય એવી કઈ એકદમ પર્સનલ દાગીનું હોય, ક્યાંક એટલું સેફલી રાખ્યું હોય, પછી ભૂલાઈ ગયું, ક્યાં મૂક્યું તું, આખું ઘર અપસાઇડ ડાઉન કરી નાખીએ. રાઈટ, because that happens. જે વ્યક્તિ જેમનું અલમારી કે કપડા બધું એટલું આપણા બધાની ટેવ હોય કે સંકેલી બધું સરખું રાખ્યું હોય ને પછી એમ એવું થઈ જાય કે મને મારી વસ્તુ મળતી નથી કારણ કે ભૂલતા જાય રસોઈ કરવા બેસે તો પેલા એમાં લેડીઝ ને કે માપ તો બુકમાં નહોતું જોવું પડતું આપણે આમ કરવા માંડીએ can't do it anymore. જેન્ટ્સ હોય બેંકમાં જાય બધું બિલ્સ પે કરી આવતા હોય ગમે તે find it difficult to do that. So તમારું આખું લાઈફ curtail થઈ જાય. And that is part of the personality change that comes because the person feels it within themselves. કે મારાથી પહેલા જે હું કરી શકતો હતા એ હવે પાછું નથી થઈ શકતું. Okay? Next. This is something I will go a little bit because આપણા South Asian માટે બહુ જ important છે. Right? અને આ vascular dementia, it's not talked about so much, so I'll do a little bit more. So આ છે મેં કીધું arteries ને veins આપણા બ્રેઇનમાં હોય ને એમાં change થાય. So જ્યારે મોટી આર્ટરીમાં let's say burst થયું હોય, what do we call it? A stroke. You get a hemorrhage and there is a stroke. પણ ઘણી વાર નાની નાનીમાં થતું હોય ને તો ખબર ના પડે અને કોઈ વાર નિંદરમાં પણ થઈ ગયું હોય when you are sleeping and you don't realize that you have had small, it's called TIAs. Okay? Next one. So this is really important because we have to understand it so that we can actually help the person. So koi વાર તમને dementia નું કહીને you have to find કે vascular છે because it works differently. So our clots છે ને, so that's one is a hemorrhagic shock. અને શું થાય ક્યારેક આપણને લાગી જાય તો bruise થઈ જાય હાથમાં, right? So if you have a burst in your brain, the cells around that little thing starts bruising and you actually get a scar in the brain, right? ઝાંખું પડી જાય. So that's one part of it. Or there are leaks into small capillaries, પછી સાવ dry થઈ જાય. Okay? So this is happening inside the brain, within the vessels કે ગમે તે. અને કોઈક વાર એકદમ ઓચિંતાનું થયું હોય ને and you will find કે ઘણા બધાને પેલા શરૂઆત હોય ને then મોટો stroke આવી જાય. That becomes really debilitating. Okay? So blood pressure control is really important. જે કોઈનું તમને doctors કે blood pressure control is really, really important. Okay? Next slide. So જ્યારે vascular હોય ત્યારે concentration and communication, right? Because there are changes happening in the brain. One thing you have to note is depression. And with COVID, this has affected so many families. જેમ હમણાં રાજેશભાઈએ કહ્યું હતું કે ઘણીવાર આપણે કહીએ આમ ઓશવાલ સેન્ટરમાં આવતા હોઈએ, એકતા સેન્ટરમાં આપણે બધા સાથે મળતા હોય ને તો ખબર નથી પડતી. ઓચિંતાનું સાવ લોકડાઉન થઈ ગયું એટલે એમ લાગે આ 4 દિવાલની વચ્ચે પુરાઈ ગયા છે. અને ઘરમાં પછી છોકરાઓ કામ કરતા હોય તે લોકો કે હવે અત્યારે અવાજ નહીં કરો કે ગમે તે એટલે એમ થાય કે સાવ આમ આપણે કન્સ્ટ્રેઇન થઈ ગયા કારણ કે બારે નતા જવાનું, ઘરે રહેવાનું, આપણે શોપિંગ કે કરી આવતા હતા એક ના અમે કરી આવશું તમે ઘરે રહ્યો મોટાઓને કે. So this is really affected. અને the progression, the step change happens much more quicker. So one thing is ke imagine ke હું જ છું અત્યારે, if I travel, I'm in middle of Beijing, everything written around me is in a Chinese language. મને કઈ સમજ ના પડે તો અંદરથી કેવું થાય ગભરામણ થઈ જાય ને, little bit of that anxiety attack, right? So one part of કે આવી જાતની બીમારી આવે ને તો અંદરથી anxiety થઈ જાય. And that can lead into, કે hold on કરતા હોય કે ગભરામણ જ અંદરથી. So anxiety and depression go together. અને ઘણીવાર કોઈને seizure પણ આવી જાય. જો blood supply constraint થઈ ગયું હોય ને ક્યાં અંદર તો આપણે કહીને કોકને fit આવી ગઈ છે એવી જાતનું. So that can happen as well. So when it is vascular dementia, it's slightly different. અને ઓચિંતાનું કંઈ થશે. Alzheimer's છે ને gradually develop થાય. જ્યારે vascular dementia, it kind of in steps, કે કંઈક થયું હોય, so it changes at a certain level, but પાછું કંઈ થાય તો another level, right? Going down everything. Next slide. So when you are noticing this, આપણી ફેમિલીમાં કોઈ પણ વ્યક્તિ હોય, it is going to be very, very difficult for them to accept કે કંઈક છે different. So એ લોકોને મનાવી પટાવી ગમે તે રીતે, you have to take them to the GP, and there are 3 things they will try to rule out. Okay, one thing, આપણા ઘણા બધાને, we have a vitamin B12 deficiency. So vitamin B12 ઓછું થઈ જાય ને ત્યારે પણ ચેન ના પડે, મૂંઝવણ થતી હોય, some of the symptoms are similar. So they will do a blood test like that. Blood pressure control is another one. And કોઈ વાર, infection હોય, somebody who gets a UTI, મોટી ઉંમરના હોય તો urinary tract infection થઈ જાય, તો એનાથી પણ થઈ જાય. So then the white blood cells bloodમાં હોય. So usually they will do a blood test to rule out કે કાંઈ બીજું નથી ને. Okay. Most GPs have 4-5 questions એવું પૂછે તમને. It's called a mini memory test show, just to make sure કે okay, શરૂઆતમાં. અને some of them, it depends on, અત્યારે GPs પાસે time નથી હોતો, but you really have to tell them, can you just do this? Explain. અને કોઈ ઘરમાં હોય ને તો એ લોકો સાથે જવું પડે, because sometimes the person is reluctant to talk about it. એકલા જાય એ લોકો GP પાસે તો yes, they will say ઓલું આ થાય છે, ઓલું થાય છે, પણ મેમરીની વાત નહીં જલ્દીથી કરે. So really, really, it has to, અને ઘણી વાર એક વિઝિટમાં નહીં થઈ જાય, 2-3 વાર GP પાસે જાશો ને પછી લોકો તમને મોકલશે. Okay, so 3 things to watch out. એક blood test કે vitamin B12 deficiency, તમને કાંઈ એવી જાતનું ઇન્ફેક્શન, especially urinary tract infection ના હોય, અને કાંઈક બીજું, કોઈકને thyroid problem હોય કે એવી રીતે. So there is nothing which is an underlying cause. Okay, next. Now, if you look at Brent, Harrow, our area ma, what we have is a service called a memory clinic. અમુક જગ્યાએ they don't have a memory clinic service, so neurologist કે એ લોકો પાસે મોકલશે. But for most of us, either you go into old age assessment unit or a memory clinic. So for Brent, memory clinic અહીંયા Fairfield Road ઉપર જ છે, very close by to Ekta Center. In Harrow, it's at Bentley House. Okay, and usually the referral, તમને આવે તો you have to go, and this is really important. So for us living in Northwest London area, we have memory clinics. So usually they don't send you to any different, but it's just કે કોઈ વાર આપણે ક્યાંય બહાર હોઈએ, so these are the people who can support you with a diagnosis. Next one. So here is that they need to make an assessment, and the assessment is a long questionnaire. To give a diagnosis of dementia is a little bit long-winded. Usually જ્યારે બોલાવીને તમને memory clinic માં તો એક કલાક 1.5 કલાકની appointment. Okay, and one thing I would say is, Rajesh bhai, તમારા dad હતા, he can't go on his own, but you need to get somebody who knows him very well to go with him, right? હું એક વાત કરું, એક બા હતા, તો ઓલા ડોક્ટરે પૂછ્યું કે તમે સવાર ઉઠીને શું કરો છો? તો બાકી હું તો ઉઠી ઓલા કબાટમાં હોય, હું એની સાથે વાતચીત કરું, પછી મારું સવારનું ચાલતું હોય. બા કહેતા ભૂલી ગયા કે જે કબાટ છે ને એમાં એની મૂર્તિઓ છે, કે એમના કૃષ્ણ ભગવાન છે. એટલે ઓલો ભાઈ કે કબાટ સાથે વાત કરે છે, એનો મતલબ જ કઈ અલગ થઈ જાય, કારણ કે ભૂલી ગયા કે કબાટમાં એમની મૂર્તિઓ છે. કે સવારમાં ઉઠીને જે નિયમિત પૂજા કે પ્રેયર્સ કરતા હોય, કે એવું નથી કે એમનું સાવ મગજ ખસી ગયું છે, પણ બિચારા બોલવામાં એ લોકોનો ઘણો ફેર પડી ગયો. એટલે એમની સાથે કોઈ હોય તો એ સમજાવે કે ના ના, આ કબાટમાં છે ને બાની મૂર્તિઓ છે. Okay, so that kind of detail is really important, because ઘણી વાર જે questions પૂછે અને ઇંગ્લિશમાં હોય, ગુજરાતીમાં એ ઘણી વાર ના હોય, તો ટ્રાન્સલેશનમાં જરાક ફેર પડી જાય છે. they will do a behavior assessment as well. And sometimes they will send you for a scan. Atyare scans because there was a long line ke jaldi thi martu natu, so not many people during COVID. But usually, a scan is quite good because it will give you where if there are infracts in the brain. So if you go to the next slide, please. So one is a CT scan, MRI scan છે અને કોઈ વાર કોઈને vascular problem હોય ને તો જરા ડાઈ કરી અને એનાથી you can take a brain scan. Okay, so 3 different types. Usually CT scan કરે અહીંયા આગળ, but just it is good to be aware of. Okay, there are different types of scans. Okay. Next. So the memory clinic is really the big part of getting a diagnosis. It takes a long time. GPA refer કર્યું હોય ઘણી વાર 6 મહિના તમને turn ના આવે. So you have to chase it up because there's a long list, there's a waiting time. Okay, and within those 6 months, situation can deteriorate very quickly. So this is the difficulty. As I said, કે પહેલી જે appointment છે એ 1 થી 2 કલાકની હોય. પછી they carry all the details. જે carer હોય એ તમારા સાથે ગયા હોય, so they will ask questions. Next slide. So just tips. Okay, if you are taking a loved one for this assessment, થોડુંક તમે ડાયરી રાખો અઠવાડિયા પહેલાની કે 2 weeks, right? Because what the diary does, okay, frequency ketli che, things that are happening, right? As I said, ke ghana hoy બારે નીકળી જાય, ઘણી વાર આપણે કિચનમાં હોઈએ ને બાપુજી આગળનો દરવાજો ખોલીને બારે વયા ગયા, જે ગભરામણ થાય કે હવે ગયા ક્યાં, ગોતવા ક્યાં જાવું, is very difficult. પણ આજે આપણે કોઈને ઘરમાં બાંધી ના રાખી શકીએ. We are not allowed to lock them in the house કે કાંઈ. એટલે ઘરમાં કોઈક જોઈએ જેમની નજર કરે, ઓર કે બારે ગયા હોય તો સાથે કોઈ જોઈએ. લાઈક મારા સસરા હવે એ ટાઈમે બધા ગોલ્ડસ ગ્રીન, કોઈનું શમશાન હોય તો બધા 183 બસ લઈ ને ગોલ્ડસ ગ્રીન જતા હતા, રાઈટ? હવે બાપુજીને એકલા કે તમે ગોલ્ડસ ગ્રીન એકલા ના જઈ શકો. તો પછી મારે ઓલા હિરજીભાઈને ફોન કરવો પડે કે બારમલભાઈને ફોન કરવો પડે કે તમે જવાના છો તો બાપુજીને સાથે લઈ જાશો, right? This is really important because નહીતર તો સાવ 4 દિવાલમાં થઈ જશે વ્યક્તિ. It is, and this is the difficult area to navigate કે એ લોકોને કેટલું બારે જઈ શકે, કેટલી freedom હોય ને કેટલા ઘરે આપણે એમની ધ્યાન રાખીએ. And this is also between this time between when you think dementia જેવી અસર છે and by the time you get a diagnosis, because until you get a diagnosis you can't say what's happening. ને 6-8 મહિના time નીકળી જશે. Okay? The other thing is paper and pencil, because sometimes કઈ વાત કરતા હોય ને તો medical people will give you words અને વાત થતી હોય ત્યારે just write it down. Because this is a new, આપણે બધાને બધું આવડતું ના હોય. So whatever they are saying, write it down and check it out afterwards. કે મને આ સમજ નથી પડી. Right? This is really important because this 2-hour appointment, you cannot get back again. You can't get back. That's really precious time. So when you have an appointment for memory clinic, please take your paper and pencil, do a little bit of your homework, tayari thodi rakcho, so that you can ask the questions that you need to ask. Next. Yeah, oh yeah, hearing aid. Yeah, sorry, that's very good. Yeah, because by that time, સાંભળવામાં થોડો ફેરફાર થઈ ગયો હોય, ચશ્મા હોય, hearing aid હોય, you have to take them. Okay. So I think Debbie would give you what happens next. So I will skip this. Next slide. Now, again, so people will ask me, કે શરૂઆત થઈ છે, how long will it be? It's very difficult to predict whether વર્ષમાં વધારે વધી જશે, 2 વર્ષમાં વધી જશે. But I'll just give a little bit of kind of things that can happen. So if you see, there are people who live to the age of 90, they have a perfect life. And I think we all know those kind of people. કે પોતાનું કરી લઈ, હરે ફરે, મોજ મજા કરી શકે છે. Then the second line is કે બધાને જેમ ઉંમર થાય એમ થોડો ફેરફાર થાય, બટ આપણું દરરોજનું કામકાજ, દરરોજનું બધું થઈ જતું હોય. So બહુ ચિંતા કરવાનું નથી. Now the third one, where there is that yellow. So કોઈ વાર you get a infection, a UTI, 2-3 વાર, and that could create either something that is a medical word, it's called delirium. હોસ્પિટલમાં હોય ને ત્યારે કે એમ લાગે છે કે આમાં કઈ ફેરફાર થઈ ગયો છે, they are delirious, કે મને કંઈક સંભળાય છે, મને અહીંયા કંઈ દેખાય છે, right? So but if they get the treatment, they go back, they climb up. But the one with Alzheimer's and dementia, gradually you get mild, then moderate, and then it gets severe to the point where, as Rajesh Bhai said, okay, they are now doubly incontinent, they are bedbound, very difficult to have conversation. That's that last part, that severe dementia. Okay, but the progression is there. Sometimes it's very fast, sometimes it can be up to 10 years. Okay, next. So, yeah, progress થાય છે કે mild dementia હોય. So main thing is about forgetfulness, short-term memory loss. મેં કહ્યું ને, સેમ વસ્તુ 3 વાર, સેમ ને સેમ ક્વેશ્ચન. યા, જે ઇન્ટરેસ્ટ હતો, કોઈને રસોઈ કરવામાં ઇન્ટરેસ્ટ હોય, there are men who love to play cards, they can't follow the card game. So જે ઓલી હોબીઝ હતી ને, એમાં થોડો ઇન્ટરેસ્ટ ઓછો થતો જાય. અને અમુક વસ્તુ કે હવે બસમાં જાઓ, ન જાઓ, ના, મજા નથી આવતી. So something that starts with mild dementia. Then as it progresses, and the word I used was cognition, right? ઘણું બધું. હવે હું ઘણી વાર વાત કરું કે આપણે લગ્ન હોય ઘરમાં તો લિસ્ટ બનાવવાનું છે. તમે કોઈ મોટાઓને બેસાડશો ને, તે લોકોની સિસ્ટમ હોય, નામ લખાવતા જાય, right? Because that's something they have done. They can remember without our family trees. But with this, that cognition starts. કે ના, હવે નથી યાદ, આના છોકરાઓ ક્યાં હતા, આ ક્યાં હતા, એ બધું ભૂલાતું જાય. Because for that you need to join so many dots. કહો છો ના, લગ્નનું લિસ્ટ બનાવવાનું એક મોટું કામ છે, but what it requires કે payments કરવાના હોય, કે budgets કરવાના હોય, investment decisions કરવાના હોય. So that starts really affecting at this point. And Debbie will talk to you about some of the things we need to keep ready in terms of advanced care plans and directives. And this one, when it's moderately severe, one thing that happens is daytime and nighttime. Because, you know, તમે 4 દિવાલની વચ્ચે હો કે હવે અત્યારે દિવસ છે કે રાત છે, ટાઈમ ઝોન્સ એમાં ફેર પડી જાય. તો ઘણી વાર શું હોય, રાતના જગતા હોય, ઘરમાં આટા મારતા હોય, પછી દિવસના પછી એ લોકો સોફા ઉપર કે નિંદર આવી જાય. That can happen. And sometimes people say કે આપણે તરસી ટાણું કહીએ ને, 6-7 વાગે, ત્યારે એકદમ એજિટેશન થઈ જાય. So this happens. અત્યારે આ જે છે moderately, ત્યારે નવડાવા ધોવડાવાનું અમુક એ કામ, that's a big job, especially in a family environment, right? And people who get to that stage, that's when, yeah, whoever is near, એ લોકોને માટે કેટલું બધું વધી જાય. Yeah, so this is a difficult. અને છેલ્લે પછી you have to make decision કે હવે whether બા or બાપુજી can stay at home or not. So that's another very difficult decision, right? So these are kind of made it a bit simpler, but just something to think about. Okay. Next one, please. Okay, I'll stop here. I think I've talked too much. We will come back once Debbie has spoken about the memory clinic. And okay, thank you.
Hi. As you know, I'm Debbie, and my role in Brent is as project manager of the Dementia Hubs team. And what that means is that we support people once they've had a diagnosis of dementia, usually from the memory clinic, I have to say. Then they are usually referred back to the care of their GP once that diagnosis has happened. And you've heard about the diagnosis process, which is a range of different tools, actually, the assessment tool, which is about memory, and very often in Brent, they will provide a scan, and then that will lead to a diagnosis. So from the day you first get referred from your GP to the time you would get a diagnosis is probably 4 to 6 months. It's quite a long time at the moment, but that's because it is quite a complex assessment process that takes place. I work quite closely with the memory clinic down in Fairfield, and I have to say they are absolutely brilliant. The staff that work there are so dedicated to, as you said, trying to get an early diagnosis for people so that they can slow down the progress as much as they can. But once a diagnosis is made, you're referred back to your GP for support. And we all know that things are quite difficult in terms of accessing GPs. Clearly, some are much better than others at getting appointments and seeing your GP regularly. But what we hear, and I think Sheila will agree with me here, is that people really struggle to still get appointments with their GP. And that's a real challenge for people who have just had a diagnosis, because not only are you coming to terms with that yourself, but you don't know what to do next, and you need guidance, you need support, you need to know what comes next, what you need to do to try and slow down the process as best you can. And in an ideal world, that would come through your GP, but unfortunately it doesn't always work that way. So myself, Sheila, and the rest of the team kind of slot in there. Once the diagnosis has been made, the memory clinic will refer to our team, and we will make contact with the family. Usually it's the family carers rather than the person that's had a diagnosis. And we will have a talk with them, usually on the phone, first of all, just to explain who we are. Because remember, when people have had a diagnosis, you're often getting a lot of contact from a lot of different people in the first few weeks, and it can be overwhelming. People are in that denial stage often. They don't want to accept the diagnosis. That's a very difficult thing for them. So we have to tread quite gently with people in the beginning, and tell them about our service and what we do. And often people will say, I don't need anything now. No, I don't want your help. I don't need anything. Take a leaflet, and we might hear from them again 2 or 3 months later when things have begun to settle in with they're accepting, they realize they're going to need some help, and they don't know what to do. So, you know, we're there often giving a helping hand, but sometimes in the background a bit, waiting for people to accept that they need the help from us. So what do we do? So I work at Ashford Place, as was said, which is a charity in Cricklewood. But my actual role is for community action on dementia. So I work across Brent to support people once they've had a diagnosis of dementia. And that includes their families. So we work with the whole family to ensure anything that's needed, any support that is needed, we try and get them to get that in place to make life easier for them. One of the main things we do is we support the the Dementia Cafe network. Has anybody heard of dementia cafes, memory clinics? They're called all kinds of different things. Anybody heard of those in Brent? Some have, great. So we actually have 13 memory clinics or dementia cafes in Brent at the moment. They all run on different days. We have some running Monday to Friday. They're all over the borough. And so some people, some of our clients go to a different cafe every day. Why do you think we need dementia cafes? What's important about dementia cafes? Anybody got any ideas? For carers? Yes. Anybody else? Share experiences? Anything else? Social interaction, exactly that. So at a dementia cafe, what we try and focus on are the things that we know support people who have got memory issues or they're living with dementia. And that is physical activity of some description. And remember, we're dealing with generally the older population, so we're not expecting them to do, circuits or whatever. It's gentle exercise. It may be chair-based sometimes. It might be yoga. It could be Tai Chi. It's gentle, controlled exercise that gets your body moving. Very, very important. So every cafe will have some form of exercise program. It might even be dance. It could be anything, something that people enjoy and that they can all take part in. The other thing they generally do is mind games. So things like quizzes, Sudokus, number games, those kind of things, to get your mind working still so that you're actively using your mind. And the most important thing about cafes is the social interaction. Above all things, for the carers and for the person living with dementia, the most important thing is that they come together with other people and they can share their experiences. They can talk about life. It's just, we go into the cafes, don't we, Sheila? And we're amazed at the stories we hear. It's very moving. You hear about their life stories. They take you right back to, as a child, what they used to do when they were growing up, their likes, their dislikes, the conversations we have. We love our job, don't we? Because we find those conversations so interesting. People have got a story to tell, and there's nothing better than allowing people that opportunity to do that. And people say to me sometimes, oh, I don't need to go to a cafe. I've got friends or I've got my family at home and we talk. It's not the same. It really isn't the same as having those conversations with people you don't know, because you're using bits of your memory that you don't use by just chatting to your son or your mum or whoever. So it's really, really, really important that we use, we get out, we mix with people, we meet new people, and we're socially active. That's the most important thing, I would say, once you have a diagnosis. The other things we do is we have a team of advice workers. Sheila is one of them. And they're all trained in advice work. They're absolutely brilliant. They will look at the whole family situation. Once a diagnosis is made, they will look at your family situation and they will say, okay, what is there available to support you? It might be a benefit, a financial benefit. For example, attendance allowance. It might be a reduction in your council tax, which will help you then manage your finances better. It might be a taxi card or a blue badge to help you get around the community safely so that you can still get out and about and continue to live well with dementia. The most important thing is that people can continue to have a life and live as well as they can with dementia, because dementia is like any other illness. We wouldn't say, oh, you've got a problem with your heart, that's it now, you're going to stay at home forever, you mustn't do anything, don't hide yourself away. It's exactly the same with dementia. It's a part of your body that has an illness. There should be no stigma attached to that, no shame. It's a part of your body that isn't well. And we have to break down those barriers and make sure people are talking about dementia like we are tonight, which is fabulous. But there really is no shame to having a diagnosis. I know it takes time to come to terms with it, and with any diagnosis, I think. But, you know, there is no shame, and there should be no stigma. And I think this is really important that we're talking about it that way. What else do we do? So our team will also do things like if there's a needs assessment needed. So if things start to progress, as we talked about, if maybe the person living with dementia is not managing their care in the same way they did before. For example, they might not be able to safely bath themselves or shower themselves anymore. They may find preparing a meal difficult. They may not have an appetite, or they may forget actually that they haven't eaten. So those things are really, really important, and we will talk to the family. And if we think that there is a need for an assessment from adult social care to come and look at what's going on in the family home and see whether there's any support needed, then we will help make a referral for that process to happen. Also, they will look at, are there any adaptations that are needed in the property to make sure that the person can remain safe in their own home. Everybody wants to stay in their home as long as humanly possible. We know that. Everybody wants to be comfortable in their own home. And that's why it's really important that we identify what is needed early on. So, for example, we don't have things like people having falls because there's not the adaptations in their property that make life easier for them. So, how do you get help? Well, it's easy. We've got loads of leaflets. They're over on the side there. If you are worried about your memory and you haven't had a diagnosis of dementia, please do talk to us anyway, because we're here for everybody. But importantly, talk to your GP, please, because if you're starting to notice changes that you're not sure about what they are, don't wait. I think the slides explain that perfectly. Please see your GP. Don't leave it, because the longer you leave it, the more difficult it will be once there is a diagnosis. So get in there early to see your GP. Explain what you're noticing for yourself or your loved one. If it's your mum or dad or whatever, then go along with them and explain that to the GP, and don't be fobbed off. Okay. We know GPs are busy. I understand GPs are very, very busy, but your health is important, and therefore you have to stand your ground and you have to insist. If you're not getting anywhere, then please don't just give up. Talk to us and let's see what we can do, because maybe you need to think about moving to another GP. I don't know. But what I'm saying is, don't just give up and think that's it. You know, I'm not going to get any help. There's always somebody that will be willing to listen and to help. My phone number is on the leaflets here. As I said, I'm Debbie. If you have any questions or anything, I'm happy to answer them when we finished here tonight. But if you get home and you think, oh, I should have asked about that, or I'm not sure about that, you want to just send me a text or you want to email me, everything's on the leaflet, please just ask. And if you've been worrying about your memory, please just give us a call or go and see your GP, or both, please. Yes. Oh, sorry. So we are big lottery funded, unfortunately. So we're a charity and we are funded by the big lottery. So possibly not, but there are Admiral nurses in other boroughs. We don't have Admiral nurses here in Brent. So Admiral nurses are specialist nurses that deal with dementia, but we don't have them here in Brent. So we're kind of filling, although we're not medical specialists, I put that out there right now, we're not medically trained, but we're kind of filling that gap between the memory clinic and the GP, because there's nothing kind of in the middle there, and it's kind of a void. You get lost. And the number of people that say to me, once I got my diagnosis, there wasn't anything. The GP didn't want to know. He said, okay, you've got a diagnosis, fine. You know, I don't know what I can say. You know, there's no medication that's relevant for you. So you've got to just get on with your life. But there's so much more that people can do. And I think that's why it's important that we have this project, because we can fill that gap and we can be a support to people. I mean, we've worked with, Sheila will tell you, we've worked with clients for years, for the last 2 or 3 years, who come to when we do some events, they come to our events, you know, they come to the cafes. It's a long-term commitment we make with our clients. It's not something, we're not in and out within a few weeks like some services. We're committed to supporting you all the way through. You know, whatever it takes, we'll try and support you. We don't know all the answers, but if I don't know, we don't know, we'll try and find out for you. That's what our promise is.
Varsha, Debbie, thank you very much for your time. Very informative. Before we go to Q&A, can I ask how many people here know someone who has dementia, Alzheimer's, or possibly have it themselves? Wow, that's a huge number. And we are talking within our committee about possibly setting up, I'm not sure if you call it a clinic, but an event here. So it would be maybe twice a month, dementia dancing. So I think it's been proven that if you're active, it really does help you. So would you be interested in functions like that going forward? Good.
Great.
So all of these hands that are up, we would like you to come to our future programs then. So if you have any questions for either Varsha Ben or Debbie, you can catch them afterwards, or you can ask in a group if you feel more comfortable. If you do have a question, please go to Prafula Ben. She's holding a second mic. So,
Bits of exercise.
so I can't answer the question. So Debbie, Varsha, you need to be here.
Okay, so we have a question from Nenta Ben.
And please say who it's for.
Is it on? Yeah, thank you. It's really informative. As somebody younger, I can now help my parents if they're going through it. So I really, really appreciate coming. Varshaben, this question's for you. You mentioned about the aluminium pans and boiling water. We often have tea a lot in those aluminium pans, or they cook things in them. You know, we have curries and dals and all this mistan and all of that. Does that make a difference, or is it just water?
So main thing is about water. So please don't make tea because you're going to boil the water. We all know it's now, I mean, some people will say there isn't a link or whatever, but from what I have read, that this, where we call it like cuss, or it becomes black, that dissolves in the water. And so just kind of, it's because something we do regularly. So imagine if you've done it for a number of years, then the accumulation goes up. If it's done occasionally at a big event or whatever, it's not a problem. Yeah, because sometimes we don't have those large, big ones. But if you do it on a daily basis, then my recommendation is use stainless steel, please.
Hello, my name is Chandusha, and it's about somebody who's got fits. What happens is sometimes fits only stays for a few seconds, 5-10 seconds. Sometimes it goes up to 1 minute, a minute and a half. And after recovery, the person is back to normal. Is this part of dementia? Both,
Ha-
whatever you can.
So again, there are number of things. So when you're thinking about, you ask a question. First, has the person heard the question really well? Are they able to recall, go to that part of the brain where the memory is held? And then are they able to come back to you with an answer?
Yes, after a person is recovered, and I ask questions, everything is back to normal. And
So-
the person is around 40 years of age.
Okay. So as I said, the way our brain functions, right? So you get something, you get some information, you store it, you bring it back, or you connect it with something else. Sometimes, how do I say it? Let's talk about children because it's a little easier. Okay. If you have a very naughty child who doesn't pay attention, okay, so their attention is somewhere else. Sometimes as adults, we are thinking of something else. Something else is going on in our brain, and you have not received that information. It's sometimes when you are being more attentive, you get the information. With dementia, you really need to get a proper diagnosis because I'm not a clinician, but there are various different elements of memory recall, which a professional is better able to explain. But I'm just trying to give you that how do you notice it? You say they can recall it afterwards. Maybe 5 minutes later, same thing they can recall, but 5 minutes before they could not. So there is a lapse somewhere.
No, the problem is when after those few seconds or couple of minutes or minute and a half, whatever happens, person doesn't recall anything. You can't get anything from within that period. Doesn't remember anything. After that, once it's recovered, back to normal. You won't even realize the person is suffering from any of those things.
I think you need to do.
Fits.
So no condition
Fits.
diagnosed. No condition diagnosed.
I don't know. There was something. She's a lady, and she's been given some medicines to control these things, but it only controls to a certain degree.
So if you're worried, I would say your GP is the person you should be talking to.
Yeah.
It sounds to me as if there might be a long-term condition that might be causing these absence, kind of periods of absence there. And there's lots of conditions that can cause that. So I would say if you're worried and it's happening more, then you should go and see the GP, or they should go
No,
and
its
see their
GP has been
GP.
referred. Is going to the specialist now.
Good. Good. Yeah.
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 Okay. Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Rajesh. My mother is here as well, so I have to be very careful what I ask. She thinks I'm going to say she has dementia. She doesn't have dementia. I was wondering, one of the things I've noticed as obviously she ages and I age is I say we are becoming lazier. And in her case, she's definitely sleeping less. Is there any, I noticed you didn't sort of really touch on those, not that you should. Are you finding, in yoga, you mentioned pranayama and so on, you can reverse sometimes. Similarly, by increasing activity and by increasing sleep, do you slow down the process of dementia or not? Do you know if there is any such thing?
Okay. So one thing that has happened now is we are not so focused in how we sleep. At 11 o'clock at night, you open your WhatsApp and before you know, it's 12 o'clock, right? Social media has taken over. We are watching a television program. There's a binge because the next part of the series is coming. Yeah. I'm equally guilty of it. So one thing about regular functioning, what do we tell children? At 8 o'clock, it's your bedtime because tomorrow is school. Yeah. Sleep has a time when our brain recharges, right? And if somebody has a good sleep hygiene, I call it sleep hygiene, that, okay, 10 o'clock, you say, maybe I'll watch the news, then I slow down. Some people will say, I can't have a tea after a certain time. But you need to slow down so that you can fall asleep. Okay. Now, chalo, okay. આપણે નિંદર જે યોગા નિંદ્રા કરતા હોય, સવાસન કરતા હોય, રાઈટ? આપણા આ છે ને શું કહીએ, વાંદરા જેવું છે આપણું મગજ. અહીંયાથી ક્યાંય અડધું દુનિયા ફરી આવશે ને આવી જશે એક ક્ષણમાં. અને અત્યારે આપણે ટીવી જોતા હોઈએ, એવા ન્યૂઝ જોતા હોઈએ, દુનિયા નાની થઈ ગઈ છે. કોઈ આજે ગુજરી ગયું, 10 મિનિટ પછી તમને સમાચાર આવી જાય. પેલા તો 10 દિવસે ઓલી બળદગાડી જાય ને ખબર પડે કે ભાઈ ગુજરી ગયા છે. એટલે અત્યારે આપણું જીવન બહુ ઝડપી થઈ ગયું છે. અને એ ઝડપી જીવન માટે આરામનો ટાઈમ ઓછો થઈ ગયો છે. અને હું મારી પણ વાત કરું છું કે મોડે સુધી ઓલા કંઈક વાંચ્યા રાખું ને પછી એમ થાય હવે હમણાં જાઉં છું, બીજી અડધી કલાક થઈ જાય સુવા જવામાં. એટલે મારે બધાને ને આપણે જેમ ઉંમર થાય, નિંદરનું ખાસ ધ્યાન રાખવું જોઈએ. કારણ કે નિંદરનો ટાઈમ છે જ્યારે તમારી બ્રેઇન, આ બ્રેઇન છે ને ઇલેક્ટ્રિકલ એક્ટિવિટીથી ચાલ્યા કરે છે. ઓલું ઇલેક્ટ્રિક મશીન ચલાવ્યા રાખો. એને આરામની જરૂર પડે. ના, એ કલાક તો હર વ્યક્તિ ઉપર હોય, પણ ઓલી ઘટાઘટ નિંદર, ઓલા નસકોરા વાગે એવી નિંદર જો તમને આવી જતી હોય ને, કારણ કે યુ ગો ઇન્ટુ અ રેમ સ્લીપ, ડીપ સ્લીપ. ઘણી વાર છે ને એટલા સપનામાં હોય, હજી બ્રેઇન ચાલતું હોય, રાઈટ? પણ એમ થાય કે ઓલી ઘટઘટાટ નિંદર આવી ગઈ. ઘણા, મને ખબર છે, નાઇરોબી બપોરે જમી અને અડધો પોણો કલાક આરામ કરી લે, રિફ્રેશ થઈ ગયા હોય. હવે અત્યારે આ લોકો છોકરાઓને કહે છે ઓફિસમાં, પાવર નેપ લઈ લેજો એક. હા, ના, આ તો આપણી રેણી કેણીની હું વાત કરું છું કે કેન્યાથી કે આપણે બપોરનો ટાઈમ હતો, કામેથી આવ્યા હોય જમી કરીને કે અડધો કલાક લઈ લે. ઇટ વોઝ એકચ્યુઅલી ગુડ કે ઈ ટાઈમ આપણે બધા લઈ લેતા. એટલે બધા ઘરમાં બધા પછી 4 લેડીઝે 4 વાગે ચાય પીવાનો ટાઈમ હોય, રાઈટ? Which is actually really good during the day because you have that really restful. ને અહીંયા છે ને આપણે ઓલું મશીન ચલાવ્યા જ રાખીએ છીએ. એટલે છે ને આરામ જોઈએ, પણ થોડુંક સ્લો ડાઉન મારે કરવાનું છે. અને અમે ઘણી વાર થઈ કે હોલિડે ઉપર જશું ને, પણ ફર્સ્ટ ડે તો બીમાર થઈ જાય, કારણ કે એકદમ મશીન ચલાવ્યું હોય. હા, really સ્લીપ હાઇજીન. કઈ ગૂગલ કરજો, એવરીબડી. There's a slide actually. Sorry, on હોય તો there are 6 or 7 things we really need to look after. એક છે hearing, right? Because a lot of people when they get older, their hearing and imbalance in hearing also affects the way your brain processes. And sleep is one thing, really important. અને જે યોગા કરતા હોય ને, and if you understand yoga nindra and the effect of that yoga nindra, yeah, this is the one, right? Okay, they just cake ni jem che. One is તમારી friendships. આપણે કહ્યું ને કે social, આપણે બધા એટલા મળેલા જોડેલા છીએ, અને આ 2 વર્ષમાં બહુ ફેર પડી ગયો કે ઓલી ભાઈબંધાઈ આપણી હોય, મિત્ર મંડળ હોય, જો એ ના મળે તો સાચે મૂંઝવાઈ જાય, રાઈટ? અને આપણે આ હોલ ને બધું કેમ કર્યું છે કે આપણા જ્ઞાતિના બધા આપણે સાથે, જ્યાં સુધી તમારો બધા સાથે મળવા કરવાનું હોય, ઘરમાં મલ્ટી જનરેશન ફેમિલીઝ હોય, નાના છોકરાઓ રમતા હોય તો મોટાઓને કેટલી મજા આવે, રાઈટ? સો that is one part of the social activity. Exercise. What is good for your heart is good for your brain at any age, right? So what I showed, that you need to make sure that your heart gets enough oxygen. This is really important. And it's not that once you reach 80, હવે બેસવાનો ટાઈમ આવી ગયો. ના, શરીર હલાવીએ, ઓક્સિજન મળે, બધા સરખા કામ કરવા જોઈએ. હેલ્ધી ડાયટ આપણે પચાવી શું શકીએ છીએ, પછી અમુક વાર થાય કે અમુક એજ પછી ભારે ખોરાક આપણે પચાવી નથી શકતા. એટલે આપણા બધાની પોતપોતાની તાસી, અને એમાંય હમણાં આંબેલ ચાલે છે. આંબેલનો મહત્વ એ જ છે કે તમે એવી જાતનું સાત્વિક ખોરાક લ્યો કે તમારા બોડીને જરા રેસ્ટ મળે. મેન્ટલ સ્ટિમ્યુલેશન, દેવી બેને કહ્યું કે સુડોકુ છે, મ્યુઝિક છે. If you play a musical instrument, it recharges different part of your brain. હમણાં નવરાત્રી હતી, ચોલા ગરબા રમીએ, તાળી પાડીએ, રાઈટ? પગના ઝાંઝર, really that exercise is very, very good for you because you are using different part, rhythm, sound, movement. So mental stimulations, puzzles, che, game te karo. Sleep, put one. And a stimulation really late at night. We all need to be just careful, okay? We slow down. And if we develop a very good sleep hygiene, because I think a lot of us, and my youngsters, my son che, I've got 2-meter commute. Mara khatla thi table upar કામ કરવાનું છે. હમણાં 2 વર્ષથી ઘરેથી કામ કરે છે. પછી જાય વોક કરવા કે હવે 10 વાગ્યા છે ને મજા નથી આવતી, હું વોક કરવા જાઉં છું. This has happened to our young people in this pandemic. And they need to get used to that sleep is really important. Stress management. And I talked about anxiety, okay, and something about deep relaxation. So, je pranayam karave ne, aluna karave, anulom vilam, ek alternative nostril breathing. So imagine your brain has 2 halves. What it does is it takes your oxygen up and down the other way. And yoga ma tamne em kese ke ek baju karo ne same thing biji side e karwano. So you balance both sides of your body. Right? There is a scientific reason in it. Olo undo swas. Okay, apna swas etlo લઈએ કે નીચે છે diaphragm સુધી. Right? આપણે હાલચાલ કરતા હોય ને આપણે બહુ છીછરો શ્વાસ લઈએ અહીંયા ઉપરથી જ. We don't breathe very deeply. So take some time. Okay, 3 વાર ઓમ બોલીએ તો that take the breath, and that breath coming down and going out will stimulate your oxygen within your brain. So stress management, and especially for the elderly, that's really important. So just very simple, but 6 things to really bear in mind.
એટલું સારી છે, શાંતિ છે. પણ અમારો દીકરો જે કહી ગયો ને નીંદર નથી આવતી ને આ નથું ને એ બધું ઉંમર કામ કરે. અને બધાની રહેવાની રીત, સમજવાની રીત, જાણવાની રીત બધાની જુદી હોય છે. હવે જે ધર્મનું કરતા હોય અમને એમ થાય અત્યારે ખૂબ શાંતિ છે, ચાલો થોડી વાર એક સામાયિક પ્રતિક્રમણ કરી લઈએ. અને બીજું છોકરાઓને કેમ વાંક આવે, ઓલા યાદ આવે, એની માને ટીવીની સ્વિચ ઓન કરતા નથી આવડતી, કોઈ ટીવી આગળ ગઈ જ નથી. એટલે એને એમ થાય છે કે બા આખો દી જાગે છે, પણ બધાને પોતાના શરીરની યાદી હોય જ. કેટલી ઊંઘ જોઈએ છે, શું છે એ બધું અત્યારે કઈ કામ નથી. બેઠાડું જિંદગી થઈ ગઈ. હા, એટલું ખરું કે જે અમે પેલા હતા અને બધા સાથે ગ્રુપમાં કરતા હતા એ ના મળવાથી થોડું મગજમાં એમ થઈ જાય, કારણ કે તમે તમારા ઓલા ચડાવીને તમારા કામમાં હો. અમે શું કરીએ, પેલા ફળીમાં 8-10 જણા હોય, કપડા ધોવા જાય ને તળાવે તો અહીંયા કેટલી બેનો વાતો કરવાની મળી જાય. પાણી ભરવા ગયા હોય ગોરા કુવા ઉપર તો અહીંયા બેડું ધોઈએ ને એટલી વારે પાણી 2-4 વાત કરી લઈએ. હવે એ તો બધું અહીંયા નળ ફેરવો ને અહીંયા મળી જાય છે. અમને ક્યાંય એવું તો કઈ મળે નહીં. તો જે વર્ષો સુધી જે અમે કામ કર્યું હોય અને જે રીતે કર્યું એ અમને યાદ આવે જ. એટલે હવે અત્યારે બધું બદલી ગયું છે, તો એ પ્રમાણે રહી છે. પણ એમાં છોકરાઓ સારી રીતે રાખે છે અને મને સારું છે, આનંદ છે. નીંદર કેટલી કરું છું.
મોટા બા મળવા ગઈ નહીં તો મને કે મને રાફુદળ યાદ આવ્યું છે કે ઈ નાનપણ, એ ઉંમરે એ નાનપણની વાત વધારે યાદ આવે ને નાનપણની શૈલીઓ બધી બહુ યાદ આવે. એટલે અને આજે આપણું જીવનમાં ઘણો બધો ફેર થઈ ગયો છેલ્લા વર્ષો થયા. અને જ્યાં સુધી પ્રવૃત્તિ હોય ને, આપણું કંઈ કામ હોય, રસોડામાં કરતા હોય કે ગમે તે, લેડીઝ માટે, જેન્ટ્સ માટે, આઈ નો મારા સસરા એ દરરોજ સવારે કિંગ્સબરી કાંટો મારી આવે, ચિત્રલેખા લઈ આવે, અખંડ આનંદ લઈ આવે, થોડીક વાર વાંચે ગમે તે. અને બપોરે દુઆ દઉં છું કાંતિભાઈ નાગડાને કે ઓલું આપણો કેનમોરનો હોલ છે ને, એ બધા જેન્ટલમેન માટે કરાતા રમવા માટે ગોઠવી કરી હતી. શું આજે સાચું કહું છું કે એ 70s 80s જે બધા મોટાઓ આવ્યા ત્યાં દુકાનો હતી. કેન્યામાં શું હતું કે બાપુજી હોય ને, થોડીક વાર દુકાને ઓલા ડ્રાઈવર સાથે લઈને એમનો ટાઈમ નીકળી જતો હતો. અને અહીંયા લંડનમાં એ ટાઈમ કાઢવા માટે બહુ અઘરું છે. એ ટાઈમ કાઢવા માટે બહુ અઘરું છે. અને અત્યારે જો બ્રિજ ક્લબ હતું, ઘણા બધાની ડિફરન્ટ એક્ટિવિટીઝ છે. એટલે કે people in their 60s start learning bridge because that is an activity which is very social, right? So some of the hobbies, આપણે જે ગમતી વસ્તુ હોય, સુશલાબેન સત્સંગ કરાવે છે. હવે જો સત્સંગ બંધ થઈ ગયું, ઘણો ફેર પડી જાય કે ઓલી દરરોજ દર બુધવારે રાહ જોતા હોય કે આ શૈલી મળશે, આપણે આ પ્રિપરેશન કરવાનું છે, આ કામ કરવાનું છે. હવે 2 વર્ષ બંધ રાખીએ, ફેર પડી જાય, હકીકત છે.
Hi, my name is Bharat Shah. First of all, thank you very much, both of you, for a very informative and very entertaining presentation. First of all, Varsha, you mentioned about the memory clinic. Now, is the referral made by the GP?
Take that one. Yeah. Yes, so it is. The GP can do an assessment himself, which he'll normally do. It's a very short assessment about your memory. And then if he is concerned about the memory from that assessment, he will then make a referral to the memory clinic. And it's the memory clinic that will then pick up all of the other diagnostic tests that they need to do, including a scan usually. So that they can determine what kind of dementia we're talking about, because that's important. Having a full diagnosis so you know exactly what you're dealing with is really important.
So I presume that this is meant by a neurologist, or is it just document?
Sorry, say that again.
Is this the memory clinic? Is it manned by a neurologist?
Yes, there are. So there are physiotherapists or occupational therapists as well. There's a whole team of people and they are brilliant. They work together very well. What usually happens is you'll have the first paper assessment. So that's the full assessment we were talking about, which is the same assessment used across the country, by the way. And that will be a very detailed assessment of your memory. And that is done usually either in the memory clinic, or sometimes they come out to your home. We've been doing that a lot since COVID, because I think at home you see people in their natural kind of area, or where they're comfortable. So therefore they behave in a slightly different way to the way they behave if they were in a doctor's surgery, let's say. So sometimes it's better to see them in their home environment. So they'll do that. They'll do the full assessment, which takes 1 to 2 hours, as was said. Then there'll be often there'll be a scan. Most people will get a scan if the memory test shows that there's a concern about the memory. Then there'll be a scan. And then the third part will be coming together to see the consultant, who will put all the stuff together to give you a diagnosis. That's how it works. And that process takes between 4 and 6 months, roughly.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hi, Debbie. I'm just following on from the previous gentleman's question. You said that once you get a diagnosis, you are referred back to the GP. I've got 2 questions. What should be our expectation once the diagnosis reaches the GP, and what do they do for us? What should we expect them to do, if they do anything? And secondly, is there any medication if somebody's diagnosed, let's say, with mild dementia? Is there medication they can take to slow down the
So,
dementia at this time?
yeah,
or not?
very interesting question. So do you want me to leave the medication to you? I mean, the medication, it depends on the type of diagnosis. So there are medications that can help, but they're not for every type of dementia, unfortunately. So vascular, for example, there's no medication that will support if there's a vascular dementia diagnosis. There are, and they're finding new drugs all the time. So things are developing all the time. Remember, this is a very complex condition. You know, as we said, dementia's there's 100 different types plus. So, and it's the brain, the most complex organ of the body. So we're talking about a very complex situation here, and things are progressing, and they're learning about these conditions all the time. So the hope is that drugs will develop. The second part of your question was about the GP. So what usually happens is, when you have a diagnosis, you're referred back to your GP, and you'll get a discharge letter sent to your GP, which says what diagnostic tests were done, what the findings were of those tests, what they found during the written test, you know, the questions test of memory, and the home environment, what they found if they went to visit them at home, what their behavior was like, you know, was there a carer involved, everything. They detail everything. It's a really good written report, and that will then go back to your GP. And at the end of the report, it will say what the consultant, and the same as any consultant will say, what do you need to do now? What the GP needs to do now. So often there might be a referral to the incontinence clinic, for example, if there's an issue with the incontinence. It might say this person needs a needs assessment from adult social care, and then the GP should follow up with those referrals. My experience is that doesn't always happen, and sometimes they need a bit of a prod. And as the person, as a family member, you can remind your GP. You can be on the phone saying, "Has that been done?" But yes, my experience is when you are referred back to your GP, you're in control, and you have to be the one making access to the GP. You're not going to get suddenly an influx of GP calls. That's not how it works.
2 things we need to look out for. Okay, so during that journey from getting a diagnosis and living with the condition, if the person is depressed, please do get treatment. Or if the behavior is really challenging, I don't recommend antipsychotic drugs, but sometimes to manage it, they are prescribed for a short time. Okay. This is now living with the condition over a length of time. So it's not one point. Things will happen as they develop. Yes, Rajesh bhai. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you've had that experience, because our feedback that we get a lot is that, you know, that doesn't happen, or people have pretty much left to their own kind of devices. So if it is happening, and there are some, don't get me wrong, there's some brilliant GPs out there that are doing a fantastic job, and they put everything into what they're doing, but sometimes we just have to be there prodding them a bit. I think so. Yeah. Absolutely. And I know they're snowed under. This is no criticism. They're obviously really busy, and they've got lots to do, but you know, you've got to be worrying about you and your loved ones. That's the most important thing.
My name is Himmat Lal Shah. Actually, the lady already asked a question about medicines. So I'll not go on that one. Once it is diagnosed, એકવાર diagnosed થઈ જાય પછી એને slow down નો process કાંઈ છે કે medicine જ લેવી પડે?
So there is one medication, Aeroset, sometimes is used, but it depends on what is happening. And a lot of times, if we miss out the social, then it starts going quickly, because that person is really afraid inside, right? So part of the treatment, if you want to call it, is not a medical treatment. You now need to think, how can you live well with this condition? So people around the person with dementia will need to change. The person with dementia has very limited ability, but those of us who look after that person, we now need to change. And there are certain things, and today we haven't covered, but there is a Mental Capacity Act in UK, which very few people understand. When do you lose? So for example, the person has got a diagnosis of dementia, and by that time, their knees are not working very well. Can they make a decision that I want the knee operation? Yeah. Or can they not make the decision about the knee operation? Because there are difficulties. If you have a dementia diagnosis, you're going to be on a hospital ward, but then you can't say, no, they can't have a knee replacement. Okay? You cannot do that. As a person, they have every right to get that treatment. But sometimes the doctors, and this has happened over the pandemic, there's something which is called DNA, or do not resuscitate. Yeah. So sometimes your GP will ask you to fill out that form, or will ask you about your wishes. This is a big topic, so I don't want to go into that, but just there are things that once you get a diagnosis of dementia, there are certain steps you need to make, because the person will not be able to make the decisions for themselves.
Actually, yesterday we had a power of attorney workshop, which was run by a local solicitor. When you get a diagnosis of dementia, power of attorney is something everybody thinks about straight away, but we should be thinking about power of attorney before we get to a diagnosis of dementia. It's something we ought to be thinking about before that, because a power of attorney is a legal process that gives responsibility to make decisions about me to somebody else. Say I trusted Sheila with my life, and I wanted, if I lost my capacity to make decisions, I'm going to give that authority to Sheila to make those decisions for me. That is a decision you have to make when you can make that decision because your mind is clear. Okay, it's not a decision you should be making, you know, once you have a diagnosis. Actually, a solicitor wouldn't allow you to do it if you're advanced with your dementia. You've lost that capacity, they wouldn't allow you to do it. So I would say to everybody, look up power of attorney. If you don't know where to look, type in Age UK, power of attorney. There's a great fact sheet on it on there. Really, really good. Just understand what a power of attorney is. It's equally as important as a will. And it really is important that people start thinking about that early. Mhm. No, you don't need a solicitor. Yeah, absolutely. You don't need to do it. What I would say is, if you have a diagnosis of dementia, that is slightly different. I think when there's a diagnosis already, that slightly complicates it. And with our clients, mainly they've already had a diagnosis and they're saying, I need to get a power of attorney done. That's a slightly different situation because there needs to be a capacity test done at that point to make sure the person can make that decision, and they're not under any undue pressure. So I absolutely agree. The form is actually quite easy to do online. And like you said, it's £80. And sometimes you don't even have to pay £80. It's reduced if you're on certain benefits. So yeah, for anyone. Yeah, absolutely. Anything could happen. I mean, think about life. You know, no one knows what tomorrow's going to bring. I mean, I could tomorrow lose capacity because, for example, I have a stroke. You know, nobody knows what tomorrow brings. So really try and prepare yourself for that. And you know, it's giving that authority to somebody you trust. Because if you don't do that, then somebody else might have to step in. And we all know that can, you know, lead to all kinds of complications.
Thank you, Debbie. You covered actually what I was going to ask about the power of attorney. And apa mata both important chairs Kaupishpa just explained to us. Kanke it's not necessarily ke apre stage pochi jai pache think kare. Actually think about it before. And એવું પણ નથી કે આ તમારા જાયજાતની કાંઈ વાત છે so તમારે વિલમાં કોઈને કાંઈ આપવું છે કે નથી આપવું એનું આ નથી. So ખાલી આપણી કમ્યુનિટીમાં ઘણા લોકોને આ પાવર ઓફ અટર્નીની વાત કરવી નથી હોતી because they're very afraid કે હું બધું કોકને સોંપી દઈશ then you know મારું શું થશે. This isn't about that. So તમારે હેલ્થ કેરનું મેનેજમેન્ટ કરવા માટે કે મને આવું કાંઈ થાય તો મારા ડિસિઝન્સ કોણ લઈ શકે એની માટે આ really important છે. So બે ટાઈપના power of attorney છે. There's a financial one and there's the healthcare one. And I think more and more people are actually saying the most important one is the healthcare one. Yeah, because people need to be assured that money આવું કાંઈ થશે તો મારી ધ્યાન કોણ રાખી શકશે. And these are legal processes. So of course any you know એ બધું બહુ પછી ગોર પર થઈ શકે આપણા માટે. So really Debbie, thank you for that brilliant guidance. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think Hamid Bhai is going to ask another question, but I've got an observation which I want to make. My mom was diagnosed with vascular dementia 15 years ago, and she's had this regular tests, you know, the memory tests, and she has really good days and some really bad days. So what happens with her, and this, I talk to a lot of people, I'm part of a network, you know, a support network. And what happens with mom is she'll have a perfectly really good day one day, and the next day she'll have a really bad day. And it's just recognizing those signs when she's going to have a bad day. One thing that kept happening with mom was she kept putting things in different places and then forgetting. Bhuli jai, rakhai gyu, paji bhuli jai. But in her mind, it's not that she put it away and bhuli gaya. She put it at the next person next to her and said, "Te lai li tu." Or you've put it away somewhere, now I can't find it. So we came to the conclusion that we had to find a way to manage this problem. So what we've done is we found a favorite drawer in the house. It's a chest of drawers. And sort of mom has had it sort of drummed into her કે કાંઈ વસ્તુ એવી હોય જે તમારે રાખવી હોય એ અહીંયા રાખવાની. And this has worked for us. So this is just a tip to people who may be going through this. We've had a lot of sort of challenges, and we came to the conclusion that actually this really helps her. Then when she doesn't remember, that's the place she goes to. And she knows then that it's safe. They also get very frustrated. So, you know, Aruma, I do recognize a few people who have been through the journey with their loved ones. And so their frustration, I mean, we get frustrated, but actually theirs is 100 times worse because they don't even know what's happening with them. So this is really helpful, useful, and I think we should have more of these conversations, definitely. I've got one more thing to ask both of you. Recently, I read that singing is very good for people with dementia. And there is actually a group called Dementia Singers and being trained by Dementia UK. And it's a piece of work that we want to do here at ECTA. So if anyone's interested in becoming a part of that support network, please come and see me, Ajay Parabansiben, because it's something that is kind of rooted in our culture, the singing of stavans, lokgits, garba, whatever we want to sing. And I was very delighted to see that is something that's now scientifically proven that it's good for people with dementia.
Absolutely. You'll find at most of the cafes, there is some element of singing, you know, and people absolutely love it. And you'll find that some people with slightly more advanced dementia who might not be able to put a full sentence together can actually sing a whole song. So it's incredible to see. It's, you know, and any of the arts, you know, museums, going to museums and seeing art and talking about art, any of that stimulates the brain. It's great. So yeah.
વર્ષાબેન તમે કીધું કે હિયરિંગ એid બ્રેન ને મદદ કરે, બરાબર ને?
Yes.
હિયરિંગ એid એટલે હિયરિંગ એid હોય તો એ પહેરવા જોઈએ, which will help brain. અને સ્લોઈંગ ડાઉનમાં તમે એમ કીધું કે સોશિયલ
Interaction.
કરવી જોઈએ, બરાબર ને? યા, ઓકે, થેન્ક યુ.
So two things. There may be families here. The person cannot go out. So if we can create a befriending service, right? And I know that used to work. કે બારમલ ભાઈ આવે, અડધો કલાક બેસી જાય, એ જૂની વાત કરી જાય, તો દિવસ આખો સરસ થઈ જાય. Right? બીજું હતું કે what Prafulaben said, કોઈ વ્યક્તિ એકદમ અકળાઈ ગયા હોય. So one thing that I learned was કે કંઈક એમની ભાવતી વસ્તુ, so લાપસી બનાવીએ. So you know, લાપસી પાકતી હોય, ગોળ ને એની એરોમાં હોય ને, that works. આપણા ઘણા બધા મોટાઓ, they like sandalwood નું. તો કોઈનું તેલ કે હોય, થોડીક વાર back of the hand, just rub it, right? Because that smell, which is a happy smell, we need to go to places that were happy, right? When somebody is really agitated or whatever, that would calm them down. So you need to find what works for the individual, but the sense of smell, the sense of listening, the sense of touch are equally important. So beta hoye ke વાત કરતા હોય જરાક હાથ પકડીને, that's really reassuring, right? So there are things that you can learn in a way, because it's a very dark place sometimes they get to. One more thing, in our houses, we have things everywhere, right? A person as they age, their peripheral vision narrows. Even us, you know, when we were young and we were driving, you could almost see on the side, you know, what's coming from this side or that side. Your peripheral vision narrows, right? So as a person, if you see they are bumping into furniture or whatever, watch out for that, because they're not seeing what's on the side. And sometimes they get like hallucinations, they call them. ભડકારા પડે કે અહીંયા કોઈ ઊભું છે, મારી સાથે કંઈ વાત કરે છે, because એટલું ઝાંખું દેખાય, right? This is quite common. So something that you need to kind of give reassurance, because the person is really frightened. And it's almost going back to the childhood, like how would you reassure children? This is it, the stage comes to that. So as family members or the loved ones, we need to kind of adapt, find what works for this person. And the same thing may not work after a few months. Just keep on trying.
All right, if I just, Sheila asked me to mention something which I just wanted to mention. A lot of people put their hands up when we ask, do you know somebody in your family? Is there somebody you know that has dementia? That means there's probably a lot of carers in this room, family carers. And it's important that we remember the carers and we try and do something for the carers as well, because it's really, really challenging being a carer for somebody living with dementia. It really is. It's 24/7. And it's stressful, it's physical, it's everything. And often people are trying to hold down a job as well. So Sheila wanted me to mention that, there is respite. I know it's difficult to ask for it, but it is there. Adult social care can provide some respite. There's things like sit-in services. Don't know if people have heard of that, where somebody comes in, sits in your house, a carer sits in your house with your loved one while you have some space for yourself. There are alternatives to get you some space, because we often speak to people who don't have a minute away from their caring role. Maybe husband and wife, one has got dementia, the other one's the carer. They can't leave them because they're further advanced. So they're with that person 24/7. There's no let up from that role. And it is really, really stressful. So just wanted to put that out there. There are options. So if anybody's in that situation, you can talk to us, give me a ring. You've got my number, and we can talk about what is out there in terms of support for carers.
Hi, Varsha. Thank you, Debbie, for that wonderful information. My name is Banu. Noticing from the way we are talking, I feel that a lot of emphasis is on after the person has been diagnosed. But what I feel is important is that you try and stay active before you reach that stage. And many times people retire and then they don't have anything to do. And then you see the slow degradation of the brain activity. Can we do something about that? And secondly, I have been in touch with a few groups where I volunteer. We see that women generally are more active there. The number of men is not there. And what does it take to stimulate men? I'm asking all of you to come and attend those type of groups. What is it that's blocking you? What is it in your brain? Or is there a stigma that blocks you from coming to these sort of places where you do need help and you don't come? And then the wife has to go through a lot of trauma trying to look after the man. So I do feel that please help us to find out what stimulates men and what sort of activities they would like to do, so that we can organize those sort of activities for them.
Fabulous question. Is there anybody in the audience that wants to say? Are we going to have any brave men that are going to? That sounds great. I'm up for that.
Remember the Dar Rotli parties, the Karoga parties? I think it's not beyond us, Panuben. You know, I can remember in my Sasra's shop on Bazaar Street, in the middle, every Saturday night, they used to have Dar Rotli party. And the men used to make the chapatis as well. Yeah. So it's you know, let's create this is dementia care. We have to be creative. Let's create things which interest. They're talking about men's sheds. Who has seen the repair shop, right? Repairing things. Yeah. Working with wood. So something that if you work with your hands, the fine movements, you know, ladies used to do embroidery, knitting or whatever. All those things are important. If you do gardening as well, again, you're outdoors. Those who play golf, they enjoy the outdoors. But if you want to be indoors and community activity, pizza parties. Rajesh bhai.
So again, Debbie, Varsha, thanks a lot for your time today. And if you do have any more questions, you've got my contact details. If you don't have mine, Bunsi's or Prafula Ben's, please message us and we can address them to Debbie or Varsha if you don't have their contact details. There's some information on the side there, a few leaflets, and I'm hoping this will be streamed to YouTube at some stage. So if you do want to watch it again, you're more than welcome. We hope to have other talks in the future. If you do have any ideas about events or talks that you would find informative, and if you do have certain contacts, please do let one of us know as well. So thanks for your time today. A special thanks to Dilip Bhai and Umesh Bhai as well. Thank
Just before we finish, just want to say a huge thank you to Ajay Bhai Bansi Ben for organizing this event. Dilip Bhai over there, who's been doing a superb job in recording all of this via Zoom. And then Umesh Bhai, who's always ever ready to help with everything here at Ekta Center. Bhanu Ben wants to let everyone know that there's Garba tomorrow in Hero Recreation Ground. So if anyone's feeling brave and wants to go and do outdoor Garba, do join Bhanu Ben and the team there. And a little while ago, you might have known about this. We actually got a grant from Brent Health Matters to start a Garba sort of keep fit activity here. We are going to start soon on a Thursday morning. Ajay is going to lead that project as well. So tamne maawu hoy ne, to please tamara naam tame register karavjo. You could do that from now. And it's going to be here every week. It's our sort of chai and chat, but we're going to do it with Garba. So bit of exercise as well, yeah? Thank you, everyone.